They drag her out of first class, without checking her name, without checking her ticket, only checked her skin. But when did her father pick up the phone? The entire airline was about to be grounded. "Ma'am, this line is for first-class passengers." The voice wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of chill you usually only hear in a courtroom right before someone loses custody of their own kids. Amara Cole turned slowly, the corner of her mouth already curling into something between a smirk and disbelief. She hadn't even opened her mouth yet, her boarding pass still tucked neatly between her fingers, when the gate agent blocked her path with a step so swift you'd think she was guarding LeBron. "I heard you," Amara replied calmly. "And I'm in the right line. Seat 1A. Front row. Window seat. Sun on the left, racism on the right, I guess." The agent blinked. Her badge read M. Pritchard. Mid-40s. Blonde bob. "The foundation is 2 shades too pale." A smile so tight it could have filed taxes on its own. "Miss Cole, was it? We just want to make sure there's been no confusion. First class is limited to certain tiers of passengers," she said, her voice syrupy sweet with a bite of condescension so sharp it could have sliced a mango. Amara didn't flinch. She simply lifted the pass between 2 fingers and tilted her head. "Unless the ticket's printed in invisible ink," she said dryly, "I believe this says first class, seat 1A. You want me to sound it out for you?" A few travelers behind her shifted. Someone chuckled. The gate agent's nostrils flared like a horse about to lose a derby. "We've had people try to sneak into first before," she said. "Happens more than you think." "Oh, trust me," Amara said, lowering her voice to a mock whisper. "I think it happens all the time. But let me guess, you don't usually call security when it's a white teenager in Lululemon leggings, huh?" The woman stiffened. Hook, line, and stereotype. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time. And I'm going to walk onto this plane," Amara cut in, stepping forward. "Unless you're prepared to call security, delay the flight, and explain to your supervisor why you thought the black girl in Chanel sneakers must have stolen her ticket." The gate agent opened her mouth, closed it. Behind her, the co-pilot stood at the aircraft door, watching silently. Amara locked eyes with him, then with the passengers craning their necks to see the show. "This is your chance," Amara said, her voice now calm and cutting. "You can either let me take my seat, or make the biggest mistake of your career. Your call." Have you ever seen a racist regret their life choices before they even get the handcuffs out? You might want to stick around, because Amara was only getting started. The carpeted walkway into first class had never felt longer. Amara's sneakers tapped soft against the aisle, but the silence in the cabin? Deafening. She could feel the stairs before she even reached her seat. 1A, just like the ticket said. Window view. Champagne already poured on the tray. But it was the stewardess who greeted her, if you could call it that. That really completed the circus. "Oh no, you must be lost," the woman said with a smile that couldn't pass a lie detector. "Coach is just down that way, honey." Her name tag read Trina, cabin supervisor. Amara didn't even break stride. "Unless honey means first-class passenger. I'm exactly where I need to be." She placed her bag overhead, took her seat, and crossed her legs with a grace that said, "I didn't come to fight. But I won't leave quietly, either." Trina wasn't done. She lingered. That fake smile is now twitching like a nervous tick. "Miss, may I see your ticket, please?" "Sure. Want to see my birth certificate, too? Maybe a DNA test, just to make sure I'm not Beyoncé's long-lost cousin trying to sneak into first." Amara handed her the ticket, slow and deliberate. Trina scanned it, her expression briefly betraying shock, then quickly morphing into annoyance. "Oh, be right back," she said, walking toward the galley like a woman who just got caught betting against her own team. From the corner of her eye, Amara saw a man across the aisle, gray suit, salt and pepper hair, Rolex half-tucked under his cuff, shaking his head. A soft whisper, "Unbelievable." She turned, not missing a beat. "You're right. The service is." He blinked, caught. The whispers began before the engines even started. "She doesn't look like first class. Maybe it's one of those influencer giveaways." "Oh, please, they let anyone in now." Amara didn't respond. She didn't need to, because a moment later, Trina returned, with 2 security officers in tow. "You read that right. 2. Full." Security. For a girl who had paid for her seat and hadn't raised her voice once. One officer, tall and built like a linebacker, leaned in. "Ma'am, we've had a report that your seat assignment may be fraudulent." "Fraudulent?" Amara repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You mean like pretending not to know how racism works in 2025? Trina coughed behind him. The officer blinked, flustered. "We'll need you to step off the aircraft while we verify." Amara reached in her purse. Not for ID, not for another boarding pass, but for her phone. She tapped twice, then turned the screen toward them. FaceTime was connecting, and on the other end, a man in a private office. Mahogany desk, leather chair. The airline logo is behind him. "Hi, Daddy," Amara said sweetly. "I think we've got a situation." Ever watched a corporate executive go from first class to fired in under 5 minutes? Just wait until that call connects. Victor Cole's face appeared on the screen. Sharp suit, no tie, sleeves rolled just enough to say, "I run this place, not just work here." The moment he answered, the temperature in the cabin dropped 10 degrees. "Amara," he said, his voice calm, too calm. "You don't normally call before takeoff." Amara shifted slightly in her seat, angling the screen toward the security officer. "I wouldn't, Dad," she said sweetly, "but I'm currently being accused of ticket fraud. Apparently, my skin tone's clashing with their cabin design." Victor blinked once, then leaned forward. "Put me on speaker." The officer hesitated. "I said, put me on speaker," Victor repeated, that CO cadence cutting clean through hesitation. Click. The whole row could hear now. "Miss Harper," Victor said, addressing Trina with ice in his voice. "This is Victor Cole, chairman and primary stakeholder of Horizon Air. I believe my daughter is sitting in 1A. Trina's lips parted. Nothing came out. "She's being accused of fraud?" "No, sir," she croaked. "There was confusion. We were just trying to verify." "Confusion?" Victor cut in. "Tell me, Miss Harper, would you have pulled 2 officers on a blonde girl in Lululemon and pearls if her boarding pass said 1A? Silence. "I'll ask again. Would you?" "No, sir," she whispered. "Good. Because legal just got that on record." The entire first-class cabin was now silent. Even the guy in the salt and pepper suit was pretending to look away while not missing a single syllable. Victor wasn't done. To the officers, "I'm sure you were doing your job, but you've now verified the boarding pass and the identity, and you're speaking directly with the person who paid for that ticket. My team will follow up with your department." He turned back to Amara. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Amara smiled faintly. "I'm peachy. Just watching systemic bias go up in flames." Victor nodded. "Good. I'll be waiting at JFK with a few board members. We'll discuss how our staff treats executive family and everyone else." The call ended, and for a moment, nobody moved. Then Amara turned to Trina. Her tone didn't rise. Her lips didn't curl. But her words? Razor sharp. "You just mistook the CEO's daughter for a stowaway." She leaned forward. Ever watched a corporate exec go from first class to fired in under 5 minutes? Trina didn't answer. Couldn't, because someone in 1C just let out a quiet damn, and the slow clap that followed. Yeah, that wasn't in the safety manual. Still think she doesn't belong in first class? You might want to buckle up, because turbulence is coming for someone else. Trina Harper stood there like someone just realized her dream job came with a trapdoor. Her mouth twitched like she wanted to say something, apologize, maybe, but all that came out was a squeak and a stiff pivot as she spun on her heel and disappeared down the aisle like it might erase what had just happened. Amara exhaled slowly. Not from relief, from control, because she wasn't done. Not by a mile. The 2 officers, clearly out of their depth now, muttered a half-hearted apology and followed Trina toward the galley, leaving Amara to finally sit back in her rightful seat. The passengers around her, stone silence, not out of sympathy, out of shame, and you could feel it, the thick, uncomfortable heat of realization rolling off them in waves. The kind of heat that makes you squirm in your $1,000 suits when you realize your silence was complicity. And then came the coffee. A different flight attendant, young, maybe early 20s, clearly sent in as damage control, approached with a tray. "Miss Cole, would you like a beverage?" he asked, voice a little too high, like he was praying she wouldn't bite. Amara didn't move. She just looked up and said, "Is this the part where the airline remembers I paid more for this seat than your supervisor makes in a month?" The poor guy blinked. I just started last week." She sighed. "Then I'll make this easy. Black coffee. No sugar. No nonsense." As he scurried away, the man in 1B, Rolex wrist, law firm energy, finally spoke. I'm sorry about earlier." Amara turned her head slowly. "For what?" she asked, her tone sweet as venom. "For, not stepping in." "Ah," she nodded. "So, not sorry it happened. Just sorry it looked bad." He opened his mouth, closed it, shrunk into the seat like he suddenly remembered he wasn't billing hours. Trina reemerged minutes later, her composure barely stitched together. She approached Amara with the stiff gait of someone walking their own funeral. "Miss Cole," she began, her voice like sandpaper dipped in honey. "I'd like to extend my deepest apologies for the misunderstanding." Amara held up a hand. "Let me stop you right there," she said. "I'm not here for performance review." Trina blinked. "This isn't the part where you rehearse your apology while checking if HR is listening," Amara continued. "You made assumptions, not just about me, but about who belongs here. And today, that assumption is going to cost you more than your pride." Trina's lips parted. "Do yourself a favor," Amara said coolly. "Sit down. Hydrate. Maybe Google the term implicit bias while you're at it. I hear it's trending. There are snorts now, half-laughs barely stifled behind napkins. The humiliation, this time, wasn't Amara's. And then came the ping. The captain's voice, low and even, cut through the cabin speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been notified of a change upon arrival. Please remain seated after landing, as our executive team will be boarding the plane directly." Another passenger whispered, "Executive team? Why?" Amara smiled. "Because Daddy doesn't do quiet landings. Have you ever seen Karma roll up to the jet bridge in a black SUV? No? Then don't blink. The runway's about to get real crowded." The rest of the flight could have been smooth as glass. Didn't matter, because every soul on board was now buckled into something far more turbulent than the weather. The flight attendants tried to resume service like nothing had happened, pushing their carts with the forced cheer of people waiting to get screamed at by corporate. Even the pilot's voice had shifted, less casual, more composed, as if he was bracing for impact. Amara didn't say much after that. Didn't have to. She'd planted the seed, and now she was watching it grow from behind her sunglasses, sipping coffee that somehow still tasted like justice. At one point, Trina tried to offer her a warm towel. Amara didn't even look up. "I don't need to be wiped down. I wasn't a mess." Passengers nearby chuckled, awkwardly, guiltily, like they were laughing with her, but still unsure if they had the right. Minutes before landing, a quiet buzz moved through the cabin. Someone peeked out the window, and there it was, black SUVs, waiting just outside the jet bridge. One of them had the Horizon Air emblem on the side. Another had a U.S. government license plate. "Oh boy," muttered someone 2 rows back. "This ain't a debrief. This is a reckoning." The plane touched down with a gentle bump, and a silence fell across the cabin like fog. People didn't even rush to grab their bags. They sat there, tense, curious, maybe a little afraid. The seatbelt sign dinged off, but no one stood. Instead, the front door opened, and in stepped Victor Cole. He didn't need an announcement. His presence was the announcement. Tall and elegant, with a calm that screamed power. He wore no name tag, no logo. Just a Taylor navy blazer, white shirt, and an expression like he was here to collect names. Trina visibly paled. She took half a step forward. "Mr. Cole, He held up a single hand. "Don't." Even his silence had structure. Behind him came 2 Horizon executives, tablets in hand, jaws clenched. One whispered something into Victor's ear. He nodded once. His eyes scanned the cabin and then found Amara. He didn't smile. He just nodded to her, like a father acknowledging a daughter who didn't need saving but deserved witnessing. Then he turned back to Trina. "You are the lead attendant on this flight?" he asked, though it wasn't a question. Trina tried to gather herself. "Yes, sir, I was unaware." "You were unaware my daughter was on board," Victor said. "But you were very aware of what she looked like." She opened her mouth again. He shut it with a glance. "This isn't about my daughter," he said, voice like stone. "It's about every passenger who didn't look the part. Every quiet humiliation you assumed would go unnoticed. It didn't." Victor turned to his team. "Escorted. Effective immediately. But, sir, no uniform. No walk of shame. Just leave. Now." Trina froze for one last second, then slowly unpinned her name badge and handed it over. As she walked down the aisle, passengers parted like water, no one meeting her eye. Amara didn't say a word. She didn't need to, because when justice walks down the aisle in a tailored blazer, some people finally learn what belonging really means. Still think first class is about the ticket? Turns out it's about the legacy. The door clicked shut behind Trina. That tiny metallic sound? Louder than the engines. Victor Cole didn't watch her leave. He didn't need to. Some endings don't require an audience, just accountability. He turned back to the passengers, his voice steady as a judge in his own courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption today. Horizon Air has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, whether it's whispered in the lounge or shouted at the gate. And today, that policy was tested." He let that hang in the air. Tested. And failed. A few people nodded. A couple clapped, but stopped halfway through, unsure if now was the time. Victor wasn't here for applause. He glanced at Amara again, just a flicker of pride behind his otherwise unreadable face. Then to the executives behind him. "Full report. Reviewed by end of day. And make sure our entire staff watches the footage. From a gate. To the seat. Every second." One of them gulped. "Yes, sir." Then came the real twist. Victor stepped back, gesturing toward Amara. "My daughter will deplane with me." A murmur passed through the cabin like a breeze. Amara rose from her seat, slow and controlled, her bag already in hand. No rushing, no performance, just poise so sharp it could have cut glass. She passed the man in 1B, the one who apologized too late. He looked up sheepishly and tried to offer a nod. Amara didn't even blink. She walked past rows of wide eyes and bowed heads, her steps light, deliberate. And right before stepping off the plane, she paused, turned around, and faced them. Every passenger, every silent witness. "I hope y'all remember what silence tastes like," she said, her voice soft, razor smooth. "Because you swallowed a lot of it today. No anger, no shouting, just a truth too cold to deny." Then she was gone. The SUV door opened like a page in a new chapter. Victor stood beside it, holding it open for his daughter. Not like she was his child, but like she was his equal. A senior executive tried to mumble something about protocol. Victor didn't even look at him. "Protocol," he said, "should have kept her in 1A. Back on the plane, the mood shifted again. Guilt crept in where judgment once sat. Passengers avoided each other's eyes, suddenly fascinated with seatbelt buckles and tray tables. A mother whispered to her teenage daughter, "Remember this. Always speak up. Too late for today, but maybe not for tomorrow." In the terminal, Amara and Victor walked side by side toward the private exit. No words, just that quiet, unspoken bond between two people who'd both learned to walk through fire with style. And just when it felt like things were settling, Amara's phone buzzed. A message from a number she didn't recognize. "Miss Cole, I work for a major news outlet. We just heard what happened. Would you be willing to speak with us?" Amara smirked. She tapped back 3 words. "Already in motion. Think that plane was the last place Trina's name shows up? You might want to check tomorrow's headlines. Because justice doesn't land quietly." By the time the story hit the media, it was already too late for spin control. The video, shot by a passenger in 2D, began with Trina's voice saying, "We've had incidents like this before," and ended with Victor Cole's hand gesture that sent her packing like a late return on a rental tuxedo. The caption? "Flight attendant removes black girl from first class. Turns out she's the CEO's daughter." 6 million views. First day. Amara didn't promote it, didn't tweet it, didn't tag anyone. She just let the world do what the internet always does when receipts are involved. Light the match, then add gasoline. Memes exploded like popcorn in a microwave. Trina said, "No first class for you." Victor Cole bet. The moment was viral, unstoppable. But Amara? She stayed quiet. Because nothing screams power louder than silence in the middle of the chaos you created. Meanwhile, Horizon Air's PR department looked like it had just survived a hurricane made of lawsuits and microphones. Reporters called it the first-class mistake heard round the world. TV anchors called Amara poised and fearless. Twitter called her 1A queen. Victor Cole didn't flinch. At the next shareholders' meeting, he opened with one sentence. If you still need diversity training in 2025, you're already behind and quite possibly unemployed. Trina's name was never spoken again inside Horizon HQ. Her LinkedIn? Deactivated. Her previous glowing performance reviews? Now, filed under interesting that she only got 5 stars from white passengers. But back in Amara's world, something else was happening. She got invited to speak at colleges. Her inbox filled with offers from equity panels, youth leadership groups, and talk shows. She turned down Oprah. Not because she was too proud, because she was too tired. When injustice goes viral, it comes with a media tour and a migraine. But perhaps the most delicious part? The anonymous message she received 3 days later from a former Horizon employee. Just so you know, this wasn't Trina's first time. I watched her humiliate an elderly black veteran last year. She said he was confused about where he was sitting. Nobody recorded it. He just sat in coach, staring out the window the whole flight. Thank you for not staying quiet. Amara stared at that message for a long time. Then she screenshotted it. Not a post. To remember. Because this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the ones that didn't have a phone, a famous father, or a CEO on speed dial. It was about the thousands of small humiliations that happened quietly, until one person says, "Not today." That night, sitting on her apartment balcony with the city humming below, Amara sipped her tea and smiled. Not because the world had changed, but because she had changed it. Just a little. With a boarding pass, a phone, and a refusal to be polite when someone tried to shrink her. Ever seen a smirk land harder than a lawsuit? Because Amara Cole wasn't just flying first class anymore. She was building the runway. The days that followed weren't just viral. They were surgical. Every talk show wanted her. Every headline had her name. But Amara wasn't interested in becoming a moment. She was building something longer than a news cycle. So, while journalists kept calling and hashtags kept trending, she did something none of them expected. She went back to school. Media was still buzzing when she walked into Professor Larkin's constitutional law seminar like nothing had happened. Hoodie, glasses, and coffee in hand. But this time, the stares weren't dismissive. They were reverent. Someone whispered, "Yo, that's her." Another, "That girl from the flight." Amara took her seat, opened her laptop, didn't look up, because power, real power, doesn't need to announce itself. But it does get noticed. Especially when the dean of a law school sends you a personal email. Subject line, lunch? Message, we saw what you did. We'd like to talk leadership, ethics, and possibly a keynote next semester. Amara chuckled. Ethics? From a school that hosted a hedge fund scandal 3 months ago? Goo. But still, she replied, because progress doesn't come from rage, it comes from leverage. And she had it now, one headline at a time. Meanwhile, over at Horizon Air, the ripples had turned into policy. Victor Cole, true to his word, greenlit the most aggressive anti-bias program in commercial aviation history. Mandatory workshops, secret audits, and, most controversial of all, body cam integration for in-flight customer service. Just like police officers, he'd said in a press conference, if our crew can ask passengers to prove who they are, we're going to ask our crew to prove how they treat people. Reporters gasped. Stock prices soared. The airlines hated it. But the passengers? They booked out Horizon for the next 4 months straight. Nothing sells like integrity. Amara didn't take credit. She didn't even tweet. But word got around. With it came something she didn't expect. Letters. Real letters. Handwritten. From black girls in high school. From veterans. From elderly passengers who had been moved because they looked confused. One read, "You didn't just sit in 1A. You sat in that seat for all of us." She stared at that line for a while. Longer than she thought she would. Because she hadn't meant to start a movement. She was just tired. Tired of the assumption that confidence meant arrogance. That her skin meant suspicion. That her silence meant consent. No more. She lit the match, and the world caught fire. But it didn't burn, it illuminated. Have you ever stood up so hard that the entire system shifted an inch? Amara didn't start a revolution. She just refused to sit down quietly. And sometimes that's all it takes. 2 weeks later, the story was still alive. Not viral in the TikTok dance sense, but relevant. The kind of relevant that made airline execs shift in their seats when the boardroom agenda said public trust. Horizon Air's new tagline, first class treatment. For everyone. Goo. But Amara didn't need their rebranding. She had her own. Because now, when she walked through the airport, people didn't just stare. They nodded. They smiled. A few whispered, "Thank you." She'd become a symbol. And she hated that. Not because she didn't care, but because she knew what came next. Symbols get praised, then dismissed. Framed, then forgotten. So she kept moving. She returned emails. Politely declined brand partnerships. Turned down a streaming docuseries pitched as the girl who brought an airline to its knees. She wasn't interested in being the girl. She was interested in being the warning. And speaking of warnings, Trina Harper's name resurfaced. Sort of. An anonymous Reddit post, written like a confession, showed up in an aviation forum. Title: I was the flight attendant who got fired for that viral video. Here's what I learned. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't a PR stunt. It was raw. She admitted to judging passengers by luggage and skin tone. She confessed to feeling threatened when people didn't shrink themselves. And the last line? I thought first class was a place. Turns out it's a mirror. Amara stared at that line for a long time. And for the first time since the flight, she didn't feel angry. She felt seen. Not validated. Not vindicated. Just seen. Because even the people who hurt you might be capable of facing their own reflection. Eventually, later that night, Amara sat in her apartment, surrounded by unopened mail, half-written essays, and a plant she had forgotten to water. Her phone buzzed. It was her father. No text, just a photo. A picture of a brand-new Horizon Air Training Center. A plaque on the wall read, "The Amara Cole Inclusion Institute." Below it, a quote, "Dignity is not a privilege you earn. It's the ground you stand on, even at 30,000 feet." She blinked at the screen, then smiled. She hadn't asked for it, didn't need it, but knowing it existed, that meant something. Because she didn't want fame. She wanted proof. Proof that humiliation could be recycled into impact. That silence, once broken, could echo in boardrooms. That a girl in seat 1A could spark change from a chair bolted to the floor of a moving aircraft. She opened her laptop and started typing. Not for school. Not for the press. For her. For the veteran who got moved. For the teenage girls watching from behind. For every flight attendant who still didn't get it. Ever wonder what happens after the viral clip ends? Turns out the story doesn't. It just switches altitudes. 6 months later. Different city. Different gate. Different flight. But some things stay the same. Boarding Group 1. You may now step forward. The agent called out with the same tone, as always, mechanical, bored, half listening. But this time, when Amara Cole stepped forward, she wasn't alone. She was mentoring a group of teen girls from an urban leadership program. All of them dressed sharply. Natural curls, pressed blazers, quiet fire behind the eyes. First-class tickets. All of them. A gift from Horizon Air. No cameras. No press release. Just seats. Reserved. Ready. As the girls walked past the velvet rope, a gate agent blinked twice, like her brain needed a second to catch up. Then she smiled. "Welcome aboard, Miss Cole." Amara nodded. Nothing smug. Just a soft, knowing curve of the lips. She stepped onto the plane, turned right into first class, and saw something that made her pause. A young black flight attendant. Maybe 24. Braids tied back. Crisp uniform. And nerves just barely hiding behind the smile. The woman straightened as she saw Amara. "Miss Cole," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to say thank you. What you did, it changed everything for people like me." Amara didn't answer right away. She reached for the woman's name tag. "Lena," she said, reading it softly. "You belong here. Don't ever act like you don't." Lena smiled, eyes glassy. "Yes, ma'am." As Amara took her seat, she felt it. Not pride, not power. Peace. For the first time since that day on the tarmac, She felt the turbulence settle inside her. And then came the twist. Across the aisle, an older white woman leaned over. "I recognize you," she said gently. "My husband and I watched your interview on PBS." Amara raised an eyebrow. "PBS?" The woman chuckled. "We're old. That's how we watch TV." She reached out and gently patted Amara's arm. "I just want you to know, I used to think first class was about price tags. But then I watched what happened to you. And I realized it was about permission. The kind we give ourselves and the kind we deny others." Amara stared at her, then said softly, "Didn't expect to get therapy at 37,000 feet, but I'll take it." They both laughed. And as the plane began to taxi, Amara glanced out the window. Same clouds, same sky, but a different world. A better one, built not on hashtags, but on confrontation. Not on pity, but on presence. She reached into her bag, pulled out a copy of the law school essay she had just submitted. The title? "The Air Up Here, Dignity in Altitude." She tucked it away again. Behind her, the girls were giggling about sparkling water and reclining seats. In front of her, Lena the flight attendant was serving champagne like a pro. And somewhere out there, someone was sitting in a terminal, thinking twice before asking, "Are you sure this is your seat?" Maybe they'd catch themselves. Maybe they wouldn't. But either way, the world had already moved forward, one boarding pass at a time. If this story moved you, share it, because someone you know, it is still waiting to be seen. And sometimes, all it takes to change the altitude, he refuses to switch seats. What if dignity didn't depend on appearances? What if power wasn't measured by uniforms, but by how we treat the unseen? This story wasn't just about a boarding pass. It was about the quiet resistance of a young black woman who didn't yell, didn't beg, didn't move. She stood her ground, and the world shifted around her. Because sometimes justice doesn't show up as sirens. Sometimes it walks down the jet bridge in silence and simply says, "Not today." If this story moved you, if you believe that everyone deserves respect, no matter where they sit or how they look, then don't just scroll past. Subscribe to Story Precious for more powerful stories of dignity, courage, and poetic justice. Because someone you know might still be waiting for their seat and their moment